The sun had just started its descent over the skyline of Houston, casting a golden hue across the glass towers that shimmered like quiet giants. Streets buzzed with the usual evening traffic, horns honking in rhythm with impatient footsteps of people rushing home. But in the middle of all that motion was a man who lived a life so still, so calculated, that he barely noticed the world moving around him. That man was Daniel Carter. At 43, Daniel was one of the wealthiest men in Texas. His tech company had exploded into success almost overnight, and within a few years he was on magazine covers, invited to elite charity balls and photographed with celebrities and politicians. But none of it ever filled the silence in his high-rise penthouse. His life looked perfect from the outside: luxury cars, expensive suits, an office that overlooked half the city. But the truth was, Daniel hadn't felt anything real in years. He didn't even remember the last time someone called just to ask how he was. Everything was business. Calculated, scheduled, controlled. It was just another day, he thought, as he stepped out of the office and walked toward his sleek, black sports car parked along the curb. His assistant had already sent a reminder for his 7 p.m. meeting, another dinner with investors, another night of fake smiles and shallow toasts. Daniel's hand reached for the door handle. That's when he heard it. "Don't get in the car." "Timit." Voice was small but sharp and almost panicked. Daniel froze. He turned his head slowly, surprised by the sudden interruption. Standing a few feet away on the sidewalk was a boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, with messy dark hair, big brown eyes, and no shoes. His clothes were wrinkled, too big for his thin frame. But what caught Daniel most was the fear in his voice. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a joke. The boy looked dead serious. "What did you say?" Daniel asked, confused. "Please, don't get in," the boy repeated, a little softer this time, stepping forward. "There's something wrong. I can feel it." Daniel raised an eyebrow, glancing around. People were walking past, busy in their own worlds. No one else seemed to notice the strange exchange. "You lost, kid?" Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Where are your parents?" The boy didn't answer that. His eyes darted to the car again. He was trembling now, as if some invisible force was pulling at him, begging him to stop what was about to happen. Daniel hesitated. He was a man who dealt in logic and facts, not feelings or omens. But something about the boy's eyes made him pause. That fear wasn't ordinary. It was deeper, almost desperate. He looked down at the handle again. One more step, and he would be inside. "What's your name?" he asked, still not touching the door. "Eli," the boy said. "Please, just trust me." Daniel stood there for another moment, heart strangely unsettled. Finally, curiosity overtook routine. He stepped back from the car and reached for his phone instead. "I'll call security," he mumbled. But before he could dial, Eli suddenly ran forward and grabbed his hand. His grip was firm, almost too strong for a kid his size. His eyes pleaded, "With him. Something is under the car, you have to look." Daniel's brow furrowed. This was getting ridiculous. But before he could argue, he saw something that made the breath in his chest hitch. A thin trail of liquid running from underneath the driver's side door. It wasn't oil. It was red. Blood. Daniel's stomach turned. His hand slowly lowered the phone. "What the hell?" He crouched down, cautiously peering under the car, and what he saw made him jump back like he'd touched fire. A man. Or what was left of one. His body was half hidden beneath the car's undercarriage, twisted unnaturally. His eyes were open, wide, lifeless, staring directly at Daniel. The shock hit like a brick. For a second, he couldn't breathe. Eli stepped beside him, looking down without flinching. "He was waiting for you." Daniel stumbled backward, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. "Who is that? How did he get there?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, he looked up at Daniel, his voice suddenly steady. "You were supposed to die. Today." Daniel stared at him, frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. He looked around, expecting someone to rush over, to call the police. But the street was strangely still. Too still. And then, just as suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have seen, someone must have called. But the damage was already done, not to Daniel's body but to his mind. Who was the man under the car? Why was he waiting for Daniel? And who was this barefoot boy who appeared out of nowhere? Just in time. That night the meeting was canceled. The police arrived. The body was taken away. No ID, no wallet, no explanation. But the real mystery? Eli was gone. No one saw him leave. No one knew who he was. There were no security camera records of the boy arriving or speaking to Daniel. It was like he vanished, as quickly as he appeared. But Daniel knew what he saw, what he heard, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was happening. He couldn't sleep that night. Or the night after, because every time he closed his eyes he heard it again. Don't get in the car. The voice of a child who saved his life. And maybe his soul. Daniel didn't return to work the next day. For a man who lived on routine, who thrived on schedules and lists and back-to-back meetings, this was unusual. But nothing felt normal anymore. Not after what he saw under his car. Not after Eli. He sat in his penthouse, the large windows stretching from floor to ceiling, showing a stunning view of the Houston skyline. But he didn't look at it. His mind kept drifting back to the boy, the fear in his voice, the urgency, the certainty. You were supposed to die today. That sentence echoed inside him like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. He had spoken to the police the night before, answered every question. But they had few answers for him. The man under his car had no identification, no phone, nothing, just a knife tucked in his jacket. The coroner said he'd been dead for no more than 30 minutes before Daniel found him. He had been hiding there, waiting. The investigators thought it might be an attempted carjacking gone wrong. Maybe the man had slipped under the car for cover to attack when Daniel started driving. But that theory didn't explain how Eli knew. It didn't explain how a barefoot boy who appeared from nowhere had stopped it all, right in time. Daniel tried looking up news reports, missing child alerts, anything that could give him a name, a face, something. But there was nothing. It was like Eli had never existed. And yet, Daniel remembered every detail. The dirt under his fingernails, the way he gripped his hand, the trembling in his voice. The silence of the apartment grew louder each hour. Later that day, Daniel went to the security office of his building. He requested footage from the street outside, around the time he left the building. The guard, an older man who had worked there for years, was friendly but confused. "There's no kid in the footage, Mr. Carter," he said, tilting the monitor toward Daniel. "Look, you come out, walk toward the car, then back away." "That's it." Daniel leaned in, his pulse rising. The footage showed exactly what the guard said. There was no boy, no one grabbing his hand, no one pointing at the car, just Daniel, alone, staring at something off screen, then stepping back with panic in his eyes. Daniel rubbed his face, exhausted. "That's not possible," he whispered. The guard patted his shoulder gently. "You've been through a shock. That kind of thing messes with people's memory. Maybe you imagined him." But Daniel knew better. He didn't imagine the warmth of Eli's hand, or the fear in his eyes, or the blood under the car. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. Again, he kept thinking, what if Eli hadn't been there? What if he had gotten in the car like he always did, just going through the motions? What if the knife had found its mark? He started to wonder, why him? Who would want him dead? By the third day he started digging. Daniel had enemies, that much was certain. Running a multi-billion-dollar company didn't come without a few grudges. He had fired people, outbid competitors, shut down small startups, all just business. But business could get personal fast. He hired a private investigator, not one of the polished corporate types, but an old contact from years ago, retired cop named Harris, with a rough voice and a gut full of instinct. Daniel gave him everything. The photos from the police, the time of the incident, even descriptions of Eli. Harris listened quietly, then said something Daniel didn't expect. You ever think the boy wasn't real? Daniel stiffened. What do you mean? Sometimes people show up at the edge of something terrible, Harris said. Sometimes they aren't just boys. Daniel didn't reply. He didn't want theories. He wanted answers. A week passed. Daniel stayed away from the office. His assistant handled calls and emails. He couldn't focus. He started driving around the city, retracing his steps, looking for anything that felt familiar. He drove through rougher neighborhoods where kids played barefoot in the streets and adults kept their heads down. No sign of Eli. No one had seen him. But something else began to happen. Strange, small things. A paper with his name on it stuck to a windscreen in a place he never parked. An envelope with no return address placed in his mailbox. Inside, a photo of him from 2 years ago taken at night when he was sure no one had been around. His hands shook when he held it. Someone had been watching him. And the more he thought about it, the more he began to realize Eli hadn't stopped a random event. Eli had saved him from something planned. Someone wanted him dead. The more he pulled at the threads, the more they unraveled. The man under the car wasn't in any police database, no fingerprints, no history. A ghost, but Harris eventually found something. A blurry photo from a bus station 2 days before the attack, showing the man meeting with someone else. A tall figure in a dark coat, face turned away. They were watching him. Harris's voice on the phone was tense. You need to be careful, Daniel. This isn't some mugging. This feels planned, coordinated. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then he said, But why now? Maybe you stepped on someone's toes, Harris replied. Or maybe someone's just been waiting for the right time. And just like that, the world Daniel had built on control and safety started to feel like quicksand. Then one night, something changed. It was raining. Daniel had driven out again without a destination. He was circling back through a quiet area downtown when his headlights caught movement near a bridge. A figure huddled in the corner. A small figure. He hit the brakes, opened the door. It was Eli. Same dirty clothes, same bare feet, same wide, frightened eyes. But this time, he didn't look at Daniel with warning. This time, he looked like he needed help. Daniel rushed over, heart racing. Where have you been? What happened? Eli looked up at him. They're coming, he whispered. You need to leave now. Daniel grabbed his shoulder gently. Who's coming? Eli, please. They know I told you. They know I ruined it. From under the bridge, 2 shadows began to move. Daniel froze. Eli looked up, tears forming. You were never supposed to see them. A car engine roared somewhere in the distance. Daniel pulled the boy up. We're going. Now. As they ran toward his car, the air behind them grew colder. Daniel didn't know who they were or why this was happening. But one thing was certain. This wasn't over. And it was just the beginning of something much bigger, something terrifying, something personal. Daniel had been saved once by a boy no one believed existed. Now, he had to return the favor. And this time, it might cost him everything. Rain hit the windshield in heavy sheets as Daniel gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Eli sat quietly in the passenger seat, soaking wet, arms wrapped tightly around his knees. They were speeding down an empty service road, far from the city lights now, the only sound the roar of the engine and the occasional rumble of thunder above. Daniel's thoughts were racing. Every instinct told him to call someone. Police, Harris, anyone. But a part of him knew this was beyond what any regular law enforcement could fix. This was something darker, something deeper. He glanced at Eli. Who are they? Eli didn't look at him. They've been watching you for a long time. You weren't supposed to survive that night, but why? Daniel asked, voice low. Because you were going to change something they wanted to stay buried. Daniel shook his head. That makes no sense. I run a tech company, Eli. I'm not some hero. Eli finally looked up. You think Your company is just about code and machines, but someone inside has been using it for something else. Tracking people, controlling information, things you never approved, things that were never supposed to happen. Daniel's chest tightened. Images flashed through his mind. Contracts he signed without reading every line, new partners introduced by the board, deals handled by others while he focused on growth. He had trusted too many people, assumed too much. "Who are they targeting?" Daniel whispered. Eli's answer came like a whisper. "Children. People like me. Off the grid. No names. No homes. They test things to see what works." The silence in the car grew cold. Daniel couldn't breathe for a second, and then headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. One set, then another. "They found us," Eli said, eyes wide. Daniel floored the gas. They raced down the road, the two black SUVs, behind them gaining ground. Daniel's mind was spinning. He had no weapon, no plan, no idea where to go. Just a road and a child beside him who had already saved his life once. A sharp turn came up ahead. A dirt road Daniel barely remembered from childhood trips to the lake with his father. He swerved hard, tires skidding, nearly spinning out. The SUVs followed. The trees closed in on both sides. It was darker now, narrower. "We can't outrun them," Daniel muttered. "You don't have to," Eli said softly. "You just have to trust me again." Daniel looked at him. Those same eyes, that same calm in the middle of chaos. "Stop the car," Eli said. Daniel didn't understand, but he did it anyway. Brakes screeched. The car halted. The SUVs were seconds behind. "Get out," Eli said. Daniel opened his door. Eli did the same. And then the boy did something Daniel would never forget. He stepped in front of the car, raised both hands, and closed his eyes. The SUVs pulled up fast, too fast, to stop in time, but they did, not by choice. The engines stalled, the lights died, like something had drained them completely. The men inside scrambled out shouting, weapons drawn. But before they could move, a pulse rippled through the air, quiet, invisible, but powerful. Daniel felt it in his chest like a wave. The forest around them grew still. Time seemed to slow. The men dropped to their knees, clutching their heads as if something unbearable echoed in their minds. One by one they fell. Not dead, but unconscious. Stopped. Daniel stared, stunned. Eli turned back to him, looking more tired than before. "What are you?" Daniel asked, voice barely audible. "I'm still just a boy," Eli said. "But some of us are born different. And sometimes, when the world looks the other way, people try to use that." He walked back slowly, shivering. "You were the only one who listened, that's why I came to you. You were supposed to die, but I didn't let it happen. And now, you have to do what only you can." Daniel looked around at the forest, at the still vehicles, at the boy in front of him. The silence was overwhelming, but inside it something stirred, a calling, a purpose. "What do I have to do?" he asked. "Clean your house," Eli said. "Start with your company. Find out who's behind it. Shine light where they've kept shadows." Daniel nodded slowly. For once in his life, it all made sense. They spent the rest of the night in silence, waiting for Harris to arrive. When he did, Daniel told him everything. The bodies were gone by then. So were the cars, like it had never happened, but Harris believed him. At least enough to help him start digging. Over the next few months, Daniel uncovered what had been hidden deep inside his own company: clandestine contracts, experimental software used in places it never should have been. Whistleblowers came forward, lawsuits followed, arrests, headlines. Daniel stepped down as CEO, but not before making sure those responsible could never hurt anyone again. And Eli? He was never found again. No trace, no record, like a dream you remember so vividly, only to wake up and wonder if it ever really happened. But Daniel knew. He would walk through the city sometimes, looking out into alleys and street corners, half expecting to see a barefoot boy with big eyes and a quiet voice. He never did. But he smiled more now, and he listened. Because sometimes the most powerful moments in life don't happen in boardrooms or on magazine covers. Sometimes they happen when a voice shouts, "Don't get in the car." And if you're lucky, you stop, you listen, and you live to change everything.